We need to know where things come from and why things come from where they are. We need to understand that. We need to understand the global market to understand the local market. Um, we don't manufacture really in the United States anymore. Um, that those jobs have gone, and we hear excuses as to why these things have occurred, but the reality has to do with ownership of businesses and stockholders, especially the Fortune 500. It can be India, it can be Africa, it can be Central South America, it can be China. They didn't take the jobs went there because there was an opportunity for a corporation to save money and to make money as a business for its stockholders.
Okay, let me steal you for a second.
Sure.
Give me an update on the trip last year. Now, you spending half of the year in China, half of the year here in the States. But last year, the big thing I remember getting tons of emails from you about was about 42 African heads of state heading to China.
Yes, sir.
And Hugh Gentile making it his business to invest in Africa.
Yes, sir.
And I also remember from a mainstream media perspective, a Western Europe media perspective, how there was some suspicion. How could China be doing anything positive for Africa, not wanting anything in return? And that was countering hundreds of years, centuries of others going into Africa and taking out everything from human labor to gold to diamonds to rubber and so on and so forth. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what's the update?
Basically, what took place was it was November 3rd through November 6, 2006. Hu Jintao, the president of China, had a forum. It was the first forum in the world of its kind, where 48 leaders from Africa descended upon Beijing for a summit. Those nations came together to look at what China had done in the last 30 years in relationship to being an isolated nation to where it is today as one of the world's superpowers. And one of the greatest things that came out of it was the Economic Development Forum of about 100 billion US dollars for the development of Africa. As far as the mainstream media, as far as we're concerned, we don't understand the relationship that China and Africa had as two continents and then multiple nations in Africa. Africa has the longest recognized diplomatic relationship with China. Hosni Mubarak, the president of Egypt, addressed everyone there, and one of the things that he had said is that his country and he considered themselves to be African. There at that time it was 50 years. It had been 50 years of diplomatic relations. China had done over 2,000 schools in Africa before all of a sudden we're hearing about it in 2005, 6, 7, and 8. But we never heard of. And you're still not hearing it. You're not hearing about the hospitals that are done. You're not hearing about roads and railroads. You're not hearing about highways. You're not hearing about the things in relationship that have been done, I would say, over the last 50 years economically. What we hear in relationship, or what we're hearing, is businesses in America and businesses in Europe all of a sudden having to compete. And through competition of what they used to dominate, they really don't like it. So they try to steer us in one direction in our community to say in relationship that China is bad for Africa but China points out many things. One, they didn't enslave anybody. They didn't take their systems of governments and life to Africa. What they did, they had a supportive nature because what they were trying to do was be recognized for who they were. Prior, we have to recognize that Taiwan in relationship was being recognized by the world. All China was trying to do was be recognized for what it is.
But China wasn't about letting Taiwan just go there.
No, sir.
You're my child. You're my son. You don't get out there and buck stronger than the daddy.
That would be correct.
You have to pay homage.
Well, last week the Taiwanese people had an election in relationship, and the population decided in relationship against the current sitting president. So I would say probably in a short order that Taiwan will unify itself back to mainland China. But our issues in relationship as far as economics and as far as what's taking place in Africa affects us here in the United States.
I got you. I have to share this with you. In doing my master's work, and I'm all but thesis over at Morgan State in International Affairs, and there was a slight philosophical difference between myself and a couple of the professors. My thesis was on African American economic cooperation. I was looking specifically at the country of Botswana. You know, here in this country, we love the bling bling, right? The bling bling comes
Yes,
from
sir.
Africa.
Yes, sir.
Blood diamonds is but the tip of the iceberg. But
Yes, sir.
one of the largest diamond reserves in the world is from Bechuana land, or what we call today Botswana.
Yes, sir.
And my theory is that African Americans ought to be intricately involved in African development. Sharon,
Yes, sir.
do you concur?
I absolutely agree. I was just trying to figure out how, when China goes into an African nation, you're right, we hear the negative piece of that, but how have they been inclusive in terms of the development of those countries that they go into?
Well, they do everything from the thing we hear about are always the resources, but what you don't hear about is the 10, 20, 30, or 40 years prior in relationship with social programs. There are different programs in relationship that are only being done by China. And that's the reason why it has a footing in Africa as strong as it is. It's just like people here in the United States fail to recognize Hu Jintao's
And this is the president of China, Hu
Yes, sir.
Jintao.
maiden visit to the United States was supposed to be during the weekend of Katrina. He watched it, called our president in California, and said he would not be coming. That was on a Friday. On a Monday, he's the first donor nation in relationship that sent $5 million to New Orleans. The planes that Matt Lauer showed on Monday morning that left Beijing on Sunday were filled with cots, blankets, and tents. You saw those cots inside of the Astrodome in Houston. We thinking it came from FEMA. Matt Lauer was showing you where it was coming from. So it's a spin in relationship to what is and what people want you to see and what they want you to believe.
Even more so, we need to be internationally aware. And,
Right.
and,
Yes.
and what I found, like when I went to Jordan, the BBC that we watch here in the States is not the BBC that you watch in other
Internationally.
places. So
Yes, sir.
if in our isolation, because
That's
we
exactly
are
what we are.
isolated in North America, if our information about what's going on in the world is only coming from CNN, from
Right.
Fox, then we're really only getting part of the story, and it's not necessarily fair and balanced.
I agree with you. And the problem there is that we fail to recognize who owned what. I mean, when you sit back and you look at ABC News and then you go ESPN and then you go Disney and you say this is all really, they're just subsidiaries of a company. They dictate, no matter what's being said in relationship as far as the newsrooms are concerned, they will dictate where this information and what we are viewing and what it is that we're seeing. We don't see the connection and relationship to the economics, the true economics.
And that's a great segue because we just celebrated the unofficial birthday of Martin Luther King yesterday.
Yes, sir.
And his birthday was last week on the 15th. But as we grow older, and I'm really proud of us, Sharon, I'm hearing more and more people, not just talking about the civil rights, but as Ray Haysbert talked about, the silver
Right,
rights,
it's
the,
time.
the economic
It's time.
parity.
It is so much more time for us to understand. We can break anybody.
750 billion black
We
dollars
can
in this country.
break. Listen to me. That's the thing that we fail to understand and recognize. We can break anybody or make anybody. It is time for us to stop marching and understand the thing that the world understands, which is the economic power. The economic power is the dollar and where you take it. If you want change, like when we talk about the true dream of Martin Luther King, when we're looking at his dream, yes, it was about civil rights. Now, I don't mean any harm. I was a child during the speech. I'm an adult now, and I turn around and I'm watching people still march. Okay, you get a 30 or 60-second soundbite. If you want a real soundbite, watch the stock market every day. Watch when you take your dollars out of a particular entity and put it in another entity in relationship that will represent you.
Let me bring it to a local level.
Yes, sir.
Last year was a big old celebration, and Sharon, this is no disrespect. I think Delegate Reverend Emmett Burns led the way of the renaming of BWI Airport to Thurgood Marshall BWI Airport. At the same time, there was a $1.8 billion expansion of the airport.
Correct.
Then my sentiments then was, I don't care if you call it KKK International, but if you send $500 million or $1 billion in business to some local contractors like Ron Lipscomb, like Plush Jones, like Randy Phipps, like some people who hire people in my community where the unemployment rate is not 10% as they speak on a national level, but more like 75, 80%, then I'm really pleased. I mean, I'm great for the name. But we need more than just symbolic.
Right.
We need the silver. We need the gold.
Correct. But what we fail to recognize is that we actually can control it.